So it's on that note that I want to bring to us, once again, our own very ace commentator on global business and leadership culture. He's an authority in fast growth and emerging markets. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, let's make welcome our guest, our special lecturer for this session on leadership and visionary leadership, an erudite scholar, a great teacher, a leadership coach, an author and columnist of the Forbes Middle East, a gentleman and a visionary leader, Dr. Thomas Scott Weir, author and founder of Emerging Markets Leadership Center, EMLC. Please put your hands together for him as he takes the podium to present. He'll be lasting for about an hour, but you will wish he was here for 5 hours. Please, let's welcome him with another round of applause.
In 1994, Jeff Bezos walked out of his office in Wall Street in New York, where he was working at J.D. Shaw. He was a vice president there. And he walked out one day. Try again. See how far I can go to the edge. Okay. He walked out, Jeff Bezos walked out of his office one day and he decided he was going to go get a sandwich for lunch. And as he walked out of his office at J.D. Shaw in Wall Street and he was walking up the streets of New York, he looked over to his side and he saw a bookstore. Actually, he saw this bookstore that should be coming up on your screen wherever it is. And he's looking at this bookstore and he's walking down the street. He thinks to himself, I wonder how many books can fit in a bookstore like this. So as only an analyst would be able to do, he begins to quickly measure the square footage that's there, and he begins to think about it, and he goes, this can probably hold somewhere between 100 and 150,000 titles. And he continues to stroll up the street to get a sandwich, and he sits down and he's eating his sandwich, and he thinks, wouldn't it be cool if there was a bookstore that was big enough to house every book in the world? Now, this is 1994. Wouldn't it be cool if there's a bookstore that was big enough to house every book in the world? So he starts to calculate in his mind. There's about 1.5 million books that existed at that point, and he realizes that that particular bookstore can handle about 150,000, and he starts to calculate it's impossible. It's mathematically, it's actually business-wise impossible to have that happen. So he goes back to his office, he sits down, and he pretty much forgets about this conversation that he's having in his head. And he sits down that day and he begins to work, and statistics start coming through his desk or through his screen as an analyst. And one of them says this thing called the World Wide Web, what we call the Internet now. Mind you, this is before Netscape, this is before Internet Explorer, this is before any of this happens. He sees the statistic come across his desk and it says the World Wide Web is growing at a percentage of 2,300% per year. So he looks at that, he's like, 2,300% per year growth, that's absolutely incredible. Things don't grow like that. That's phenomenal. What's going on with this growth? And he says over the next few days, he continues to think about it, and he goes, if something's growing at 2,300% per year, I need to do something with this. But what can the bookstore. That bookstore that I was thinking about the other day as I was going up the street to get my sandwich, I should build a bookstore on this thing called the World Wide Web. So he goes and he tells his boss, he goes, I got this great idea. We should build a bookstore on the World Wide Web. And the boss is like, have you lost your mind? Have you gone crazy? What are you thinking about? So he begins to think about it more and more. And he's like, this would be a really cool idea. You could go online and you could order any book you want at any time and it could be shipped right to you. So he goes and he tells his friends about it and everybody looks at him like, you've lost your mind. You are absolutely stupid. And they're like, and anyway, what's the World Wide Web? That'll never become anything at all. That World Wide Web thing will never amount to anything. Jeff, just go back to your job. You've got a fantastic job already. You're a vice president at a young age in this great Wall Street firm. You've got a wife. You've got everything everybody works for. But he was really bugged by this. He's like, we've got to have more. I've got to do something. Everybody he turned to said, bad idea, bad idea, bad idea. And then Jeff came up with this idea. He said, you know what? I've got to figure out if I should do this or not. So he comes up with what was called a regret minimization framework. He says only as an analyst could ever come up with it. It was a regret, and I want you to catch this. This is a core piece to visionary leadership. He came up with a regret minimization framework, and it works like this. He said, when I'm 80 years old, I want to have minimized the regrets I'll have at 80. He said, so I want to jump forward in my life from my 20s then. I want to jump forward to my life to when I'm 80 years old, and I want to be able to sit down, and I want to be able to think and have the minimum number of regrets possible. So he said, will I regret keeping my job at J.D. Shaw and continuing doing what I'm doing? No, I don't care. Would I regret not starting a business when I have a chance? He goes, ooh, I could regret that. When I'm 80 years old, there's actually a really good chance that I will regret having not started that business. So he decides right there, then and there, that what he wants to do is he wants to go for this. So he turns to his wife. His wife says it's a great idea. He goes to his parents because no one will give him any money. No bank will give him money. His friends that invest won't give him any money. He doesn't have enough money in savings. He turns to his parents and he says, Mom and Dad, I want to borrow some money. I want to start this business. So they go, he's like, how much do you need? And he said, I need a few $100,000. He needed a lot of money. And they said, okay, what are the chances of success? He goes, well, your chances of losing all your money are 70%. And he goes, but those are pretty good odds because most businesses, the chance of losing your money are 90%. So I'm 3 times better off than most businesses are. They wrote him a check. He made his way to Seattle, and today we have Amazon. A visionary leader literally took curiosity of how many books could fit in a bookstore and a random statistic and managed to create today what we know as Amazon. I want to tell you one other story, and then we're going to dive into answering this question, how can you become a visionary leader? But first of all, I need you to do me a favor. I need you to picture in your mind living someplace without running water or electricity. So I want you to picture in your mind living someplace that does not have running water or electricity. For some of you, maybe you grew up someplace like that. I grew up very near to that in my own childhood. Some of you may have traveled and visited someplace that didn't have running water and electricity. And for the rest of us, we've probably seen it at least in pictures. So I want you to get in your mind someplace without running water and electricity. Does everybody have that in your head today? Everybody's got that in your mind? For me, it was this house right here. This was Abraham Lincoln's house, the 16th president of the U.S. We happened to grow up in the same town. Now, mind you, about 150 years difference in age, okay? But we did grow up in the same town. So this was about 10 miles south of the community about where my house was. And we used to, in the summertime, we would drive down and we would go to Abraham Lincoln's house and we would look through and we would play and we would imagine what it was like to live in the early 1800s and not have running water and not have electricity and really to think about what that would be like. And it left a big impression in my mind. But each of us, we have our own no place with running water and electricity. Now, I want you to hear these words. Are you ready? You're living in that house now. So the house you pictured without running water and electricity, you're living in it. And you hear these words. In the next 5 years, every one of you is going to have running water and electricity. That's a bold statement. That's a courageous statement. But most of us in the room, I don't know how far I can get off this stage, but most of us in the room, do you know what we would do right there? Nah. What's wrong with the kerosene lamps? What's wrong with the guy that brings us the water on the back of the horse or the donkey or however you get your water? And we would be like, no, I'm not really that interested in it. Everything's actually okay the way it is. But a few of us who are more progressive would have said, yeah, that's a good idea. Let's have that running water and that electricity. Now, while we're going through and we're hearing this about in the next 5 years, every one of you is going to have running water and electricity. The same guy who makes that promise to you says, by the way, we've got this creek, kind of like this port. We could go to Lagos. We've got this small port back then, not today's Lagos. And what we're going to do is ships are getting stuck in it. So we need to dig the sand out of it so more ships can come in. And by the way, all of the commerce we do, all of the trade we do comes through that port. Now we start saying, yeah, that makes sense. I can understand that. That's not a bad idea. We should take this creek and dig the sand out of it so the ships can come in. Because if the ships can't come in, no business comes in. No business comes in, we starve. Yeah, I understand that point. By the way, I know I told you that we're going to get running water and electricity in the next 5 years. And I just told you we're going to dig this creek out here so that the ships can come in. By the way, we're also going to build a bridge. A what? A bridge. But I'm sorry, boss, but we don't have paved roads. What are you talking about, a bridge? And by the way, what is a bridge? Because remember, if I don't have running water and electricity, I don't have an iPhone or a BlackBerry. Okay, so I don't really know how to get news or anything. And I don't even have the primitive version of an iPhone. I don't have a TV because I don't have electricity. And every bit of news I get is from sitting around and waiting on somebody to either travel outside and come back and tell a story and tell us what it's like in that big world out there. Or I'm waiting on somebody like one of us to actually go on a trip, which is very few people, and come back and tell these stories. So here I am, and I'm going to get running water and electricity. And about the same time, he says, we're going to dredge that creek and we're going to build a bridge, but we don't have paved roads, so I don't know why we need a bridge. And by the way, we're also going to build an airport. A what? An airport. What in the world do we need an airport for? We don't even have paved roads or running water or electricity. And because we're going to build an airport, we need to build a hotel for the people who are going to fly to the airport. And because we're building an airport, we're going to build a car park for 500 cars. But I'm sorry, boss, we don't have 500 cars. Have you lost your mind? That was Dubai, 1959. Sheikh Rashid's first year of leadership, he announced to everybody, within 5 years you're going to have running water and electricity. We're going to dredge the creek. We're going to build a bridge, although there's no paved roads yet. We're going to build an airport. We're going to build a hotel to go with the airport. We're going to build a car park for 500 cars, although we don't have 500 cars. Oh, and by the way, we have no money. Dubai didn't get oil for a decade later, till 1969. I gave you two examples today of visionary leaders, of men who could see into the future, who could see something that most every one of us throughout every one of those scenarios of the 6 things that Sheikh Rashid laid out, we would have said, no way, no way, you're crazy, you've lost your mind, you're a lunatic, no way are you going to do this. If we were friends of Jeff Bezos in 1994, we would have said to Jeff, come on man, this is stupid, keep your good job, you've got everything's fantastic here, why do that? So today what we're going to do is we're going to answer a very simple question. What is it that visionary leaders do? When we finish in a few moments, you're going to have a great picture. What is it that visionary leaders do? And we're going to see what steps we need to take and what actions we can do from there. So the very first thing they do is they can see it. Visionary leaders can see what normal people don't. Visionary leaders, they see something. Steve Jobs could see things that no consumer was ever even looking for, asking for, wanting, and got us to buy it. He could see that little iPod as the example that he's holding there, and then he could see the iPhone, and he could literally see the changes of your life and the connectivity that could come into your fingertips and go with you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. He could see it what others couldn't. Steve is famous for saying, we never conduct focus groups. Because if we conduct focus groups, all we will get back are better suggestions on what we do already. And he said, what I need to do and what we're here to do is to give you something that you're not thinking about, something you're not looking for, something that isn't there yet. So the first thing we need to do is we need to be able to see it. But I want to explain what I mean by see it, because see it has some unique elements in it. So on your left-hand side of this screen, you'll see there the Wright brothers. The Wright brothers actually did not invent an airplane. The airplane had been around for about 100 years before they got involved in the business. So you've got these two young kids, Orville and Wilbur Wright, and they could see something nobody else could. There was already this flying instrument called a glider. So people would like push off of the edge of a hill and they would glide and they would see how long they could glide. And the really good ones could go for 4 minutes. They could glide for 4 whole minutes. But these kids had been obsessed with flying since they were really young. And they were really intrigued by this. So they decided one day, wait a minute, the problem isn't the gliding. The problem is the crashing. So people would go glide and then they would crash. And what they couldn't do was they couldn't maneuver it. So what they could see that nobody else could, remember, there's about 100 years of aeronautical history, if I could say that. I think that would be an overstatement for what those 100 years of gliding era were. But there's 100 years before these two little kids came onto the picture and began to see, and they figured out, we need something. And they actually figured out 2 things. Number one, we need to be able to control it. When you're in the air and gliding, it's a really nice thing to be able to control what's going on and to turn, to go other directions. So they figured out for the airplane to really work, it needed a control, and they figured out it needed an engine. So rather than just literally living with and thinking about the, shall I say, the term I would use is just the path of the air, they realized that what was really needed at that point was the engine to go with it. Effectively, what they were able to do was they could see what no one else could see. To be a visionary leader, you have to see what no one else can see. Now, I've spent the last 15 years of my life, I've spent living and working in emerging markets. Now, I want to tell you what most people think seeing what others don't see is. They think it's copying somebody else's idea. So they will go on a trip, they'll go to Europe, they'll go to the US, they'll go to some other advanced economy, and they'll come across either some kind of clothes, or they'll come across Starbucks coffee, or they'll come across some Amazon, they'll come across something and they'll go, I've got a great idea. I'll bring that idea back home. That's not called seeing what others don't see, that's called copying what others do. And that's not visionary leadership. It's not bad, it's a good business model. But when we're talking about visionary leadership, we're not talking about copying what others do. We're talking about seeing what others don't see. The next one in there is you'll see that it's leading today for tomorrow. That's Henry Ford and the Model T car. Again, Henry Ford did not invent the car, contrary to popular belief. Actually, the Benz company did in Mercedes. But Henry Ford could see something that others couldn't. When the car was invented, similar to most great inventions of the world, it was for the wealthy people. It was for the upper class of society. So most of us, commoners, we still rode around on the back of our horse and lived our life that we had been living with the horse world before. And then you saw these upper class people that had these cars. And it was literally up there. Henry Ford saw something really interesting. He actually saw a world to where everybody could drive a car. So it wasn't the fact that he saw and created the car. His visionary leadership was saying, wait a minute, it's not enough for those few rich guys to have a car. I want to make a car that every single one of us can afford. So he's the one that shifted the dynamic from having a world to where it was for the elite to having a world to where it was for everybody. But Henry Ford did something else that very few of us know, and it relates a great deal to HR. And frankly, it replies a great deal to continuing to rise the economy of Nigeria. Henry Ford could also see a world to where his employees were prosperous. So not only did he see a world that everybody could afford to have a car, he saw a world to where his employees were prosperous and his employees could actually buy the car. At that particular time, a work week, a work day, you made about $2.50. So this would have been in the 19-teens and early 19-teens. A typical worker made about $2.50 per day. And Henry Ford walked into work one day and he said, here's what we're going to do, everybody. We're going to make a change. Now, I just want you to, can you imagine what I'm about to tell you? Your HR directors, okay? Can you imagine your CEO walking in and saying to you, everybody makes $2.50 a day. And he actually didn't even go to the HR department. He announced this publicly. And he said, I want to tell you that beginning today, is the day that at Ford Motor Company we will have a $5 per day work. He shifted, he doubled everybody's pay overnight. The owner of the company effectively took the money out of his pocket and said, we're going to shift from a $2.50 a day to a $5 a day. He doubled what everybody made. And people are like, are you mad? Have you lost your mind? And he said, wait a minute, I'm thinking about the future. I'm leading today for tomorrow. And he began to shift the entire equation. What happened to Cadillac and Dodge and General Motors and all of the other companies? Guess what they had to do? They had to raise their pay. And guess what happened to that money that they put in their pocket? It went back in the economy. And when the money went back in the economy, guess what happened to the economy of Michigan at that time? It started to arise. And guess what happened then? More people wanted to come where? To Michigan. So all from a literal owner of a business making a decision to say to himself, I'm going to make a decision for the future. Just as though I want everybody to be able to drive that car, I want my employees to have the best future they can. I'm going to pay them more. He doubles the rate of pay, which makes everybody else rise their pay, which drives the economy up because the money's spent back in the economy. And guess who actually made more money out of the whole deal? Henry Ford. By taking an absolutely counterintuitive move, Henry Ford was able to change not only the fact of the way that everybody has transportation, he changed the way that the workplace continues on. And the final one I want to come to on visionary leaders. So what seeing it means is, number one, seeing it means that you can absolutely see what others don't. You're thinking about tomorrow today. And the third one is you can describe it. Again, Thomas Edison was not the first person to invent the light bulb. Matter of fact, Thomas Edison was not the first person for most of his inventions. But Thomas Edison had an ability that very few inventors did. Thomas Edison could put on one hell of a show. Thomas Edison was able to describe his product, his inventions, what he was doing in ways that mesmerized people, in ways that pulled them in. Still to this day, his demonstration of the phonograph, the record player, which would be the modern term of it, he went to Washington, D.C., did this presentation. It is now still featured in the top museum in the world for science and technology because of his ability to describe it, to bring it to life. His ability on the light. He did this demonstration of what's called Menlo Park around New York City. He got involved, J.P. Morgan, you've probably heard the name in the banking industry. He got J.P. Morgan to come in. Because Thomas Edison could describe it so well, he convinced J.P. Morgan Jr., to go against his father's wishes and to fund the investment. The whole time his dad was saying, this is wrong, it is bad, it is awful, stop investing, get your money back. And J.P. Morgan sliding him money on the side saying, keep going with what you're doing. This is so good. All because Thomas Edison could describe it. So when I talk about seeing it, it's not about in the privacy of your own life, when you're all alone and nobody's there and you have this kind of aha moment and you see it for a moment and then you put it away. Seeing it is that you can literally see what others are not seeing, that you're looking into the future, not now, and you're able to describe it. Because to be a visionary leader, you have to invoke others in your dream. Remember, the dreams of visionary leaders are usually very personal to them. They're usually not your dream. But what they do is they invite you, because of their ability to describe it, to become a part of it. When I put Steve Jobs up, I'm amazed when I put this photo up, how many people get goosebumps because of his ability to describe his product was absolutely phenomenal. So the next thing we need to do is we need to be able to see it. But I want to tell you where a lot of us fail as leaders. Now remember when I said a moment ago, it's a dream, it's something inside of them, it's future oriented. I don't know of a visionary leader who set out for fame, fortune, or power. I do not know of a visionary leader who set out to achieve fame, fortune, or power. I know a lot of visionary leaders who did achieve fame, fortune, and power, but that was never their motive. They didn't wake up one day and say, you know what, I'm going to go create this idea. I'm going to go create the flip chart because I want a flip chart so that everybody in the world is going to say, Tommy Weir is Mr. Flip Chart, and do it for their own fame or their own fortune or for their own power. Visionary leaders solve problems and create dreams. Visionary leaders, their focus is solving problems and creating dreams. When Jeff Bezos, if we go back to the opening story, created Amazon, it was never to become the top CEO in the world, which he was until last year. Jeff Bezos never set out to become a millionaire, believe it or not. He's well over that now. He's a billionaire. Jeff Bezos never set out to transform the way that all retail is conducted. Jeff Bezos just simply thought, wouldn't it be cool if everybody in the world could buy, if anybody that wanted to could buy any book they wanted. They were overwhelmed when they got 50 orders in a day. They thought they had succeeded. They had done a fantastic job. They never set out for fame, fortune, or power. Now I'm going to pause before I continue on because this is one of the areas I want you to catch close attention of. Some of us are sitting in the room today and we want to be visionary leaders for the attention it grabs. And I will tell you now, you're going to fail. So if you want to do that, you are better to say, I am a failed visionary leader, and put that on your business card and just stop. Because you're not going to succeed. You're in a better position today than you're going to be after you really fail. So I can predict the future for you. I've got a crystal ball in front of me that if you're after your own fame, your own fortune, and your own power, what's going to happen is you're going to lose in the future. So I would tell you, go ahead and accept that you're going to lose now and just live the life you're living. You'll be much happier in the long run. But if you want to be a visionary leader, solve a problem. If you want to be a visionary leader, create a dream. Make life better for other people. And you've got a fantastic example in a neighbor to where you are right now, President Sirleaf. And what amazes me about this is I read a lot of biographies. And when I read a biography, I try to put myself in their life. And I ask myself, what would I do then? How would have I felt? How would have I reacted? What would have I done at that moment? And I'm trying to think, if I had gone through a coup d'etat, what would have I done? Had I been put in prison, what would have I done? Had I been told for 30 years you can never run for office, what would have I done? If I was put back in prison, I would have began to realize going to prison seems to be what happens every time I go to Liberia. Maybe I won't go back. That's what would have been going through in my mind. I would have began to think through to myself and started going, you know, this just doesn't seem to be going well. Every time I end up doing this, it fails. And what she was able to do is she did something that was really unique. She believed it. She was not afraid of her dream. She believed in her dream and really stepped out and continued to push for it. And I think about how many of us, I know we're going to go to a Q&A later today, and I can tell you what's going to happen already. So I'm going to look in my crystal ball. I've worked with leaders for 25 years. All I do every single day of my life, literally 7 days a week, is I work with leaders, and I invest in it, and I love it, and I wouldn't want to do anything else. My wife will tell you, fortunately, she's very supportive of it. Unfortunately, this kind of gets the priority of my life. And I know that when we talk about visionary leadership, what's going to come up later is, yes, but. Yes, but you don't understand our circumstances. Yes, but you don't X. Yes, but you don't this. And what's going to come up when we hear those words are right here. That literally begins to signal, I'm afraid of actually believing in the vision I could have. And this is a lady who absolutely stood for it. And if you've not heard her 2008 Harvard Kennedy School graduation or commencement speech, you need to hear it. Because effectively, I'm going to tell you right now, are you ready? believe in it, go for it, live to your fullest potential, and make your dream become reality. She literally told the graduating class of Harvard Kennedy School, it's going to be a lot tougher out there than you possibly think it is. It's not going to be nearly as nice as you think it is. I graduated from this institution and I went to prison twice. I was a part of a coup d'etat, and she started listing off everything she did. I graduated. I know what it's like really out there. But what I want you to do today is I want you to believe in it. I want you to make your dream a reality. I want you to invite others to get a part of it. And I want you to live to your potential. And when I write the words believe it up there, that's what I'm talking about. If you want to be a visionary leader, you have to be willing to hear your bosses, Jeff Bezos, say, you're stupid. You have to be able to hear your friends say, you are a lunatic. You have to be able to hear everybody say, that is ridiculous. And continue on. Sheikh Rashid continued the development, and an interesting thing in it, I actually think it relates a lot to Nigeria, and it relates kind of probably the anomaly of why Dubai succeeded when everybody else didn't. Dubai discovered oil in 1966, began pumping oil in 1969. So the oil comes out of the ground. They were the last in the GCC to get oil. You guys had oil even before they did. They were the last to actually get the oil. Now, an interesting fact is the rest of the GCC made oil their focus. Oil became the economy. Oil became what everything was about. Dubai did something very different. Sheikh Rashid and his sons actually decided they were going to use oil to fund their vision, not to become their vision. So rather than having the oil wealth as Saudi Arabia did, or Abu Dhabi just up the street in the UAE, or Qatar, or Bahrain, or Kuwait, and making it about the oil, they said, let's take the oil and use it to fund our ambition and our growth and our dream. So remember, that was a pretty ambitious guy. When you say a pretty visionary guy that in 1959 could lay out those 6 pieces in the first year of office with no money at all. So it becomes the leader, and the oil starts pumping, and they continue on with it. And they had what then was the Dubai Creek, which is the thing he dredged. And they decided that they were going to add what was called Mina Rashid, so another port nearby. As it started to grow, he decided to triple the size of it. But when he decided to triple the size of Port Rashid, it was actually only at 30% capacity. So it's running at 30% capacity, and he decides to triple it. Most non-visionary leaders, most of us who, if we came from an accounting or a consulting background, would say, you're a bit premature, don't do this now. But while he's doing that, he decides, I'm going to go build, which would be about 50 kilometers outside of town, I'm going to go build this thing called Port Jebel Ali, the port at Jebel Ali. So he goes out there. This is literally in the middle of the desert, in the middle of nowhere at all. He decides to build this port. Now, I'm telling you this to see how believe in it really comes to be. Now, I'm building a port over there. I'm tripling the size of one that's at 30% capacity. And I'm building the largest in the Middle East, which is now the 9th largest in the world. Okay? The business people didn't get it. They didn't understand at all what was going on. So here we have Sheikh Rashid that's doing all of this advancement, and everything's continuing on. And the business leaders are like, he's lost his mind. The old man's gone. Mentally, it's over. He's going to destroy us. He's going to waste all of our money. So this is the discussion that's going on. So they take Sheikh Mohammed, who's the current ruler of Dubai, and they pull him aside and they said, Mohammed, can you talk to your dad? He's lost his mind. Okay, this thing at Port Rashid, we got the beginning of it, but tripling the size of this when it's only running at a third, and building that thing out there, he's lost his mind. Now this is we kind of think in success stories, which Dubai is one of the success stories. It was the fastest growing city in the world for 40 straight years, okay? So, I mean, we look at success stories and we think everything's easy. We think that everybody just kind of like falls in line. So we think that with Jeff Bezos, everybody, yeah, Amazon, it's perfect. Or we think with Bill Gates or Steve Jobs, everybody's like, yeah, boss, I'm behind you. Let's go. I want to work with you. This is great. So Sheikh Mohammed goes to his dad. He meets him out at Port Rashid, and he said, at Jebel Ali, and he says, Dad, the business community's come to me and they think you've lost your mind. They're really worried about what's going on. They think you've lost it. So Sheikh Rashidin is kind of a tough man. He has a pipe, a tawa'if, a pipe. So he takes his pipe out of his mouth. He looks down at the ground. Sheikh Muhammad's right here talking to him. Puts the pipe back in and just continues on. And Sheikh Muhammad says, now, when my dad doesn't answer your question, you don't ever ask a second time. So he finishes the business with it, and he says, come, Muhammad, jump in the truck with me. So Sheikh Muhammad gets in the truck with his father, and they start heading back to Dubai. And he says, son, you asked me a question back there. He says, yes, Dad, I did. I didn't answer in front of everybody else, but I'm going to answer for you now. You see, the problem is, you don't understand what I'm doing, and neither do they. I'm doing for you today what you won't be able to do tomorrow. He believed in what he was doing. And as leaders, we need to have that kind of resilience that we believe in and we continue on. So number one is we need to see it. Number two is we need to believe it. And number three is we need to act on it. This is Walt Disney. We're fairly familiar with Walt Disney's name. We're fairly familiar with Walt Disney's fame, which he never set out to achieve. And we're fairly familiar with the success that has come to the Disney organization. But what we're usually not very familiar with is that Walt Disney failed at everything he did. Walt Disney, from as a child and continued on through, he continued to fail, lose all of his money, restart his company, fail, lose all of his money, restart his company, continue to borrow somehow from even some of the same people along the way, and he continued on and on and on until one day, because he had failed, because he had lost everything he did. He had this rabbit, but he had actually not reclaimed the rights to the rabbit, and the company that he was doing the drawing and the animation of the rabbit for, which was made into silent movies at this particular time, the company that he was doing it for wanted more money, so they hired all of his own people and took him from him. Again, bankrupt, lost everything, because this was about the 6th or 7th time that he had lost everything, and he's continuing to act on it and not make excuses. He drew something called a mouse, Mickey Mouse. Had he not failed and continued to act on it, we would not have Mickey Mouse today. So here you have a man who just continued to act on his vision. He continued to act on it. He was obsessed with bringing better animation to people and continued to act on it, continued to act on it, continued to act on it. When everything around him was wrong and going bad, guess what Walt Disney did? He continued to act on it. The story's told that he had lost everything. He was sleeping on the floor in this tiny little studio they had, eating beans out of a can. But he woke up every day with the same passion to continue to act on it. He wasn't thinking about his success. He wasn't thinking about the financial return. He probably wasn't thinking like a rational person does. He just continued to push on and continued to keep going. And what he really did is he brought up what it really takes is, in order to be a great leader, it takes courage. Courage is the essence, the backbone that it takes to be a visionary leader. But there's a problem with courage. There's a huge problem with courage, and it's called loss aversion. The majority of us work to avoid loss rather than to achieve gain. It's scientifically proven. The majority of people work to avoid loss rather than to achieve gain. And to go for a gain, it needs to have a perceived value of 2 times your loss. So if I said to you, here's $100, and you may lose it, you may lose $100, and I asked you what it would take to compensate for that to go for the gain, the average answer would be $200 or more. So it takes 2 times the amount of a loss to go for a gain. Have you ever wondered why bonuses don't improve productivity? Have you ever stopped to really think about the concept of an annual bonus and its connectivity to organizational productivity, or shall I say, lack of connectivity to organizational productivity? Have you ever wondered why? The reason why is the gain of the bonus is too low compared to the perceived cost of the loss. So for me to really push you to become a high performer, it means I need to push you to become abnormal. I need to push you to be different than others. I need to push you to take risk. But when I take risk, what I actually end up risking is my job. And my annual pay in my job is significantly more than my 2 to 3 months of my potential bonus. So I choose subconsciously, let me just settle with doing what everybody else does, rather than actually going for the real gain, because it's not high enough to me. So some of the companies we work with, they've actually flipped it around, and they've taken their bonus rather than if you do extra, you get your bonus. They say, if you do this, you get your bonus. If you don't do it, you lose it. So they've actually are playing the loss aversion into the equation. So rather than saying you can gain this, because gaining something is less of a motivator than losing something is. More people are motivated by avoiding losing something rather than a gain. And there are dozens of economic studies that show the differences between these two. So if you're more concerned about losing something, what I have to do is flip it around the other way to realize I need to use it to my advantage, because the gain plays much lower. Visionary leaders do not think about loss. Visionary leaders do not spend time thinking about what they could lose. They have the courage to go right through it. They don't sit down and go, okay, let me do my 2 sides, my positives and my negatives, my pluses and my minuses, my gains and my losses. They don't do this. The reason why is when you believe in something, you can't help but go for it. You have to. You don't sit there and think, well, if I do this, I may go back to prison. Because if you thought that way, you wouldn't do it. You would say, oh, wait, I don't want to go to prison. I'm not going to do that. And I would back up. Visionary leaders have courage. They don't worry about the loss. They literally push forward and continue the drive that's going on. And that brings us to the final story that I'm going to share before we're going to move into the Q&A. And I'm going to put 3 pictures up on the screen. And as we put these 3 pictures up in a moment, I'm going to have, not these 3, I'm going to have you think through what's going on in the pictures. And I want you to tell me what you see as we go through it. But to recap, before we get to those 3 pictures, basically what I said is visionary leaders see it, they believe it, and they act on it. So if you want to be a visionary leader, you're going to need to be able to see it, believe it, and act on it. But I'm going to give you one final thing in my closing you're going to need to be able to do, and this is the hardest bit. So I'm going to show you 3 pictures. Everybody's ready? At the end of the 3 pictures, I'm going to ask you, what did you see in these pictures? And you're going to tell me what you began to see. So picture number 1. So picture number 1. So just look at these and take them in and then tell me, what do you see in these 3 pictures? That's picture 1. Picture number 2. And picture number 3. So what do you see in these pictures? What do you guys see? Sorry? Winners. All right, what else? We see winners. What else do we see when we look at them? Success, awards. Achievement, awards, success, winners, happiness, satisfaction, the things we long for. Do you want to know what I see? I see the disadvantage of being normal. And this is, I really want you to catch this. I see the disadvantage of being normal. And let me explain what I mean by that. How many people got the award? 1. There was 1 spelling bee champion, right? There was 1 person getting an Oscar. There's one Olympic gold medalist. What does that mean everybody else was? They weren't on the podium getting the award, were they? This is a hard message, but I want you to catch it because it relates to visionary leadership. It actually means the majority of the people were losers. It actually means the majority of the people lost. It actually means normal people don't achieve the gold medal. But society teaches us to be normal, like everybody else, to fit in, to be popular. But if you actually think about it, in an organization, 80% of the people that work in an organization are individual contributors. Only 20% are in the management ranks, and only one of them is a CEO. The CEO is not like everybody else. The visionary leader, Walt Disney, is not like everybody else. Do you know how hard it is to find examples of visionary leaders to use in a speech? Do you wonder why I was using some of them from 150 years ago? They're not that common when we look at it. And the reason for that is we're conditioned to be like everybody else. We're not conditioned to be a visionary leader. We're conditioned to be conservative and to take calculated risks. But what we need to be thinking about is, as a visionary leader, I have to break out from that pack. I have to have courage. And I want you to say that with me. I have to have courage. Because courage is what it's going to take to be a visionary leader. Courage is what it's going to take to lead your companies through these times. I know that times are economically difficult in Nigeria. But as I told the president earlier today, and I would tell all of you, I would bet on Nigeria. If you could bet on a country, I would put my money on Nigeria. Because you have the fundamentals. But what you need to do is act as visionary leaders to realize the fundamentals, and not in 10 years us sitting back in the room again together and we do it one more time with maybe a few people that are a little younger than some of us starting to show up, and we have the same discussion again. And it takes, what's the word it's going to take? Courage for every one of us to become the leader that we possibly can. So if you want to be visionary leaders, I want you to walk out of here today knowing the formula is you need to be able to see it, believe it, and act on it. But it takes courage to be able to do it. Thank you very much. Q&A? Yeah, happy to. Yeah.
Do you think he deserves another round of applause? Thank you very much. It will be, I hope you've been sending in your questions. We traditionally have agreed that we'll write the questions and pass them through the ushers. The ushers are going around and collecting them. In the next 10 minutes, we'll be done with questions. And our guest for the next session is already set. So immediately after this, we'll take the next session. So you are in for two, double barrel session. It will prepare you for lunch, I want to promise you. We'll take the questions quickly.
While they do that, can we take some by hand?
We have them already.
Okay.
Ushers, can you just bring them, the ones that you have quickly? Can you bring the questions you have quickly? The ones you have collected, ushers, let's just have them quickly, the questions.
I love Q&As, as long as they're easy questions.
This is also to remind us that during lunch, the Ask Your HR Questions session will also take place, and it will take place simultaneously with lunch. So just get ready for that. Do we have ushers with questions? Even if it's one, just come up quickly with it so that we move on. If there are no questions, it means we understood everything he said and we
agree.
We all agreed.
And we agree it will take what? Courage.
Okay, I'm sure we have a few.
That's a good question. So the first question I'm going to read out says, in your presentation you mentioned the fact that we should not copy. How does it go if we copy? How does it go along if we copy and improve on it? It's a very good question. And the reason I said not on the copying side is because I'm speaking specifically on visionary leadership. So visionary leaders can see what others do not see. If we were talking on innovative leadership, I would start bringing the idea of copying back into the equation, but from a different perspective. So copying can be a very great business practice. Improving on what others do, I completely agree with. It just happens to be today I'm making whoever asked us, I'm making the separation on visionary leaders, and that breakthrough leadership and that standout leadership don't tend to copy. They see what others do not. But I completely agree we should be scouring for ideas around the world. We should be finding what will apply, taking those and making improvements to them. Great question. Are visionary leaders made or born? Visionary leaders, like all leaders, are made out of what they're born with. Now, to not overly complicate this, getting into too depth of the neuroscience side and some other aspects, I do sometimes wonder if they're normal, though. I wonder if visionary leaders, if they perhaps don't think in the same way that everybody else does, if that's one of the elements that lets them push through. Most of us have big dreams and believe in our dreams. I may tweak that to say hope for our dreams. The challenge is to act on it, and how do we overcome our fears and develop the courage to act on it? Yeah, that's why I actually said I would probably shift it from believe in our dreams to hope for our dreams. I think a lot of us inside, we have dreams, we have hopes, we have aspirations. But actually, when it comes to believing on it, I would say that's the variable to really being able to act on it. I need to not just kind of have a hope that it's good and think about that it's good. I need to truly believe it like President Sirleaf does, to where she continued after opposition and went forward. Where Walt Disney, who continued to go one after the other. Where Jeff Bezos was willing to leave the comfort of his perfectly good job and to go and to start something. That's a level of belief that is necessary to act on it. And overcoming our fears we're patterned behaviors. What it usually means is we have either been taught that we should fear something, or we have had something in the past that we have feared. And when that happens, we continue to repeat that cycle. And what I have to do is shift over to the other side and begin to look at the success side. I find myself regularly, I would describe myself as an eternal optimist. I would consider myself as willing to go up against any challenge. But to give you a sneak peek in private, sometimes I think, oh my gosh, what if? And then I do this test. I go, okay, when did what if ever play out? So I love to swim, and on Saturday mornings I'll go out and sit by the pool with the kids, and that's usually like when the quietness of the week catches up with me. And I begin to think through, oh my gosh, I've got this big thing. I'm giving some big economic speech next week, and I don't typically give economic speeches. I'll give you a real life one. What if I walk on the stage and they don't like me? And then I think, okay, when did that ever happen? Throw it aside, let's move on. And that's what it takes to begin to go through. So you have to literally, to overcome your fear, you have to say, when did that fear ever play? And there's a term called false fears. Most people's fears have no basis in reality. They've never experienced it. They've never lived it. If you have experienced and lived it, it's a different issue, and therapists help a lot. Can a visionary leader change its strategy if he discovers that the immediate objectives forward might not be achieved? Can a visionary leader change his strategy if he discovers that the immediate objectives going forward might not be achieved? I don't know what you mean by strategy and how big the word strategy actually is in this equation. Change your plans in order to get there? Yes. Change your strategies as in your intended outcomes? It wouldn't be the same vision. It'd be an entirely different vision there. Can he do that? Sure, why not? I don't know what would be the hesitation on it, but it depends on what we're changing along that line. My boss kills every good idea I bring to him. What can I do? Get a new boss. We'll go on. What tools can one use to improve the capacity or chances of being a visionary leader? Wow. See it, believe in it, and act on it. So, I mean, to improve your chances, it really is you've got to have that picture. You've got to see what others don't see. You've got to be thinking about tomorrow today, and you've got to be able to describe it. If you can see it, then your issue is going to drive into the belief area. In an organization, is it possible for a person that is not occupying a leadership position to become a visionary leader? It definitely is. It absolutely definitely is. It's going to come down to your ability to describe it, and describe it in a way that evokes others into your dream and almost makes them want to carry and to champion that dream forward. Successful leaders do something that's unique compared to others. They make people feel really secure to go against what would normally be a fear. They give you a confidence to act. I'm not a positional authority person when it comes to leadership. I realize that we still live in the emerging markets where positional authority matters a tremendous amount. But great leaders tend to evolve out regardless of their position. And if you're not leading well before you have a position, you won't lead well after you get it either. So it's kind of distance yourself from the thinking of the position. I know the difficulty of what I'm saying. I'm fully aware of that. But it is moving in that direction. This one has a lot on it. I got to figure which one I like best. Can visionary leadership be learned? It can. But any one of us can also become a master, an accomplished, what's the word, accomplished? A really good piano player, okay? Any one of us in the room can become an absolutely master, fantastic piano player. Any one of us in the room can become a visionary leader. The issue is, and I'm going to go back to the piano, am I willing to work hard enough at it to become a good piano player? I'm not. So therefore, I will never become a master piano player. But if I decided I wanted to invest the 10,000 plus hours in learning to play the piano and become good at it and have the resilience to do that, the odds are highly in my favor that I will become. When it comes to being a visionary leader, actually becoming a good leader even, the odds are against you unless you're willing to put the hours in. It doesn't just show up. And just doing it over and over isn't it. To become a good piano player, you practice playing the piano. You don't just show up to the recital. You practice playing it. To become a good leader, you need to practice at becoming a great leader. How do you handle working with a leader who's in a position but is not a visionary? Similar to what I said earlier, it's choices you make in life. So if I was working for a leader who wasn't a visionary, I wouldn't stick around long. I would move out from there. I would look for an opportunity to try to find a visionary leader. But if I'm comfortable with it and I enjoy my life and I enjoy everything else and that's the primary piece to me, it's perfectly acceptable to have a great job. Not everybody has to become a visionary leader. Not everybody needs to become. It's perfectly acceptable to work in a company and have a great job. I'm going to go with these two. I have one here that says, great presentation. I'm switched on to go beyond. Thank you. And I have another one that says, your time is up. Thank you very much.
You need to sit here. You need to sit here. a lot of messages, a lot of things to ponder on. And I thought that it was I was wrong. It was a very, very great presentation. Do you think it deserves a standing ovation? Thank you very much. Please, you may take your seats. It's not easy to turn normal people into abnormal people. But we'll take a very quick one, and to do a special presentation to our special guest at this point, permit me to invite yet again the President and Chairman of the Governing Council of CIPM Nigeria. Let's invite the President, Anthony Arabome, FCIPM. Please put your hands together for him.
Tony, the journey that started from the Transcorp Hotel this morning, and the double journey we had to make to actually get the presentation ready, finally come to an end, everything does. We think you've done a good job of this session. I think for weeks to come, we'll be thinking of this challenge of personal transformation, about how all of us know, if we hope to be truly visionary leaders, have to somehow become abnormal. Even you seem to be thinking about it. So my immediate task just now is to say to you just how grateful we are. And I'll do so on behalf of the Governing Council and the entire membership of our institute to present you this plaque.
Mr. President will be doing another presentation, a book by Chinua Achebe, The Education of the British Protected Child. And it's done by Hybrid Consult. They are here, and I'm sure they also have the books out here on sale.
Talking to him in the car when we were coming this morning, that's absolutely spot on, because he has an eternally inquisitive mind, so something to help you there. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you very much.
You know what they say, the devil is in the details. We had a presentation material that we ordinarily should have walked along with the others, and everybody thought it was done. You know how everybody's job is nobody's job? So somehow it fell through the cracks. That small detail cost us 30 minutes late start in the morning. Thank you for your patience. We were able to rejig the program to what it's become in the course of the morning. Not quite the sequence we wanted, but I think you will agree that in the end we have a reasonable level of recovery. Thank you for bearing with us, and we hope that the rest of the program will be more pitch-free and will continue to be one you can look back on and say, wow, what a wonderful learning experience. Thank you.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate our guests very much for taking time out to fly all the way to come here and deliver this very intelligent paper. My first journey out of Nigeria, I told myself, I said, I just finished reading a book on the history of Nigeria, the pre-colonial era, and I said, if I get to travel abroad, I'll make sure that from the airport is a white man who drives me around. In the hotel that I go to, and the driver, I'll order him around just to revenge what happened during the slave trade. My first journey was not to the UK. I managed to get to Sweden. And at the airport in Stockholm, it was in November, it was a white man, so I ordered him. Somehow just say park. He would say, what is it? I'll say reverse. I was just doing that. Somehow say, he said, what is it? I say, I want to see birds. He said, but there are no birds. Snow everywhere. I said, okay, I'm searching for them. But somehow I noticed he was too obedient. So I asked him, I said, where are you from? He just looked at me and smiled and said, sir, I am from Morocco. I said, reverse. I want a real white man to suffer this thing. Speaker on. The questionnaires are still on. I'm sure if you fill them out, you should be able to give them to the ushers.